seeing things that conflict with that outlook, understanding pain and difficulty, our first, experience of death. Those are very universal feelings, and I believe in watching this film, the audience will have an opportunity to reflect on how they see the world and what they remember from their youth. So this character of Jack, who's trying to make sense of his world and the war in his heart, this warring, the faction of the way of nature and the way of grace, takes us through some of the things he remembers. He was there when his mother learned that his brother had been killed, and he feels her pain so deeply that it catapults us into a very, very groundbreaking sequence of the film, in which we sort of experience the history and the future of the universe. And we hear her cries. We hear her cries to the universe, which go seemingly unanswered. It's a beautiful and agonizing sequence. The mother is the embodiment of grace. She had to be someone who you just understood as soon as you saw her, and could be quiet and you would understand what she was thinking, and just exuded love. And ideally, she wouldn't be someone who brought a lot of sort of public history with her. So we were hoping to find someone who was new, and that's not so easy because people become exposed very quickly in this day and age. But Jessica Chastain had been quietly working in New York and studying her craft and doing theater, and our casting director, Francine Maisler, brought her to our attention. And it was definitely an aha moment when we saw her on tape. She's just so natural and so simple and so beautiful. She embodied all that we imagined of the mother.
I think it's such an important and powerful connection to make between, again, the universal and the personal. And there's so much to get out of that for all of us, or for the audience, hopefully, watching it. And it's amazing to be able to weave those two together in the same film, because they're obviously, very different. And the way Terry does it is extraordinary, because it's, again, he doesn't obviously make a film like other people do. It's not just, by the numbers. And I think Terry's creating here a kind of an impressionistic film, maybe more so than he's done in the past. You look at the script, or you look at if you try to break down the film and, look at it against other films or a traditional storyline or arc, it doesn't really fit. But then you step back and experience it, and it's incredibly powerful. You're not quite sure how that happens. You can see it traced out in your average movie by the way they're, the writer and director are kind of taking you on this arc or journey. But with Tree of Life in particular, that's not so easy to chart, and yet you're not sure. You still have this incredible, or maybe more so, powerful experience. I love the fact that people can come to it and see different things in it. So you never like to pin it down or pigeonhole it, like they're doing exactly this or he's doing exactly that. Clearly, you've got kind of a dynamic in the family that, if not universal, it's, something that many of us have experienced in different ways, that kind of dynamic between grace and nature, not to give away anything, but, that whole dynamic between different ways of approaching life. And Mother, Mrs. O'Brien in this case, kind of represents that side of the equation, the kind of grace side, whereas Mr. O'Brien is more hardened and more a traditional, slightly probably harder edged, but more traditional father figure or man certainly from that era. And the struggle that goes on and what that represents, not only in the lives of this family and the boys that are growing up within that family, particularly Jack, who's the oldest and is now reaching this period in his life where he can actually start to distinguish, if not, totally understand, start to feel the distinction between those two. We did go through a huge search of kids in Texas and Oklahoma and the whole surrounding area, looking for just that right combination. Certainly Jack being the lead, but the combination was important too. The different boys and what they represented. And certainly as Hunter, the lead who plays Jack, proved out. He's got a very strong personality, very unusual child, now growing into a man. But it was fun to see them grow as the film grew, and vice versa, to see Terry kind of, again, mold the parts as Hunter brought more to the table, and Ty and Laramie as well. That's part of the fun of it, or the thrill of it too, with Terry in particular. It isn't just here it is, and here's what it's supposed to be, and we're trying to do everything we can to replicate it. It's like here it begins, and then it moves and grows as the production and the film is shot. It's amazing, as well as in post as well. It continues to evolve. And Brad, like everybody else, had not worked with Terry before, but he was willing to go with it, he believed enough in Terry's work, his reputation, and in the, times they had been together to jump off and go with it. Same with Sean. Obviously, Sean had worked with Terry before, and they know each other well, but it starts with the script, whether it's with Sean or Brad. It's also that script, which is very powerful. I mean, it's not like reading any other script. It's like reading, a piece of poetry. And so that's very convincing as well. And I think that's the combination is certainly what attracted them.
He is a man who has bristled under disappointment. And I think struggles daily with the idea that he hasn't amounted to more. He talks about it a little bit in the movie, and there's other scenes where you see what's clearly sort of ambition thwarted. And I think he expresses that onto his children and imposes on them and his wife his shame and his, as I said, disappointment and feeling that he hasn't been given his due. And I think that happens because he can't see beyond his own day. He can't see beyond his own place on the continuum of time, and that were he able to, and were he given a perspective that shrunk him and made us all realize how small we are relative to the world, that maybe you wouldn't waste your time kind of expressing ego, and certainly not waste time imposing it on others. The kids and Jessica and Brad spent a lot of time together. We were in this tiny little town in Texas. There was a lot of time sort of running around in the street and messing around, in between shots. And a lot of times Terry would film that without their knowing. And they were Jessica and Brad were both really loving to all the boys. And I think the boys appreciated the routine, actually, and the routine, that it was sort of familiar every day, and this person was playing their dad and this person was playing their mom, and they were both very, very consistent in their respective characters, and it really worked, actually. It was very loving. I hope people recognize that sort of instantly and think to themselves, and then go on the journey, kind of recalling their own, I'm a sort of I'm a package of all that stuff, how I was raised and what I learned from my parents and what I chose to take with me and what I chose to cast aside. And he's struggling, and I think is lonely, and has been mixed up in terms of priorities, and yet searching and not having sort of just settled into that, but really wanting to understand why he is the way he is, and wanting clarity, and wanting wanting a way to kind of make sense of everything to date, and then with that sense know how to move forward. We were in this little town in Texas called Smithville, which just looks like that town. I mean, it looks like it hasn't been altered in 50 years. And there were no trailers and no trucks anywhere in sight, because Terry wants to be able to sort of walk down a block and take a right turn or a left turn and shoot. And there was the hero house and then a couple other houses, and then the talent lived, had houses as their areas, and wardrobe was in a house and makeup was in a house. And so we just lived in this neighborhood with these enormous, enormous magnolia trees. And it was sort of extraordinary. You'd walk down the street and you'd walk by a sort of sewer and the water rolling down the street, and you'd see someone's collection of Matchbox cars that had been there for 4 days and would be rediscovered again, but no one felt like they had to put them away at night, and bicycles left on lawns, and dogs roaming neighborhoods, and it was an amazing place.
I mean, to me, it's about humanity, and it's about family, and it's about trying to, in a sense, make sense of what we as individuals in our normal lives, where we become very much sort of concerned with what our immediate little chunk of that world. I think it's an attempt to show us what that is part of, without really without giving any specific direction. Just it's one man's idea of where this humanity comes from, what it exists within. It exists within a timeline. It exists within a sort of an evolutionary pattern, and it somehow, again, to me, I think that by giving it a background, giving it a setting, it allows the individual to see more humanity, more emotion, more, I don't know, just to feel a little more alive. What makes it such an emotional and successful emotional journey is the fact that the basic story is very contained. It's very small. It's very accessible. It's a small family in a small Texas town in the 50s. It deals with the immediate and intimate relationships within the family between the three small boys, three small children, and the husband and wife, and how both the family interacts. Itself, it shows their journey through some family crises of various types, and really sort of looks at how they survive and how they manage to grow through that experience, and in a very, very personal way, which I think is what makes the film accessible, is that sort of personal nature of the examination. I think one of the successes of the film, which comes from Terry's unique way of filmmaking, his filmmaking style, is the ability to take a family, an ordinary family, look at that familial experience, and then draw us beyond that and look at their position in terms of the evolution of time, the history of time, how that family exists within that continuum, and also within, in a more immediate sense, Terry's films have always, to some extent, concentrated or at least always had a component that examined the relationship between the natural world and what was going on within it. And I think that in this film, in Tree of Life, it takes that examination of the natural world to another level. And